Hello, I'm Susan Elliott, the News and Special Reports editor for Musical America. Today, we're talking with Henry Timms, who's coming up on his third anniversary as president and CEO of Lincoln Center. He's going to tell us about his vision for the continuing evolution of the center and about the summer program, which has been put together by the new Chief Artistic Officer, Shanta Thake. Hello, Henry. Thank you for joining us. First of all, congratulations on your summer plans, the festival, and also on your near completion of Geffen Hall's do-over. Pretty amazing, just amazing. We thought it would never happen, but it happened.
We couldn't be more thrilled. We're excited about it. I thought the summer season this year, which Shanta Thake put together, is just so inspiring, and we really can't wait to welcome all of Lincoln Center, all of New York back to Lincoln Center outdoors. That would be a wonderful thing.
Yes, it will. I guess the best way to start, since you've been in the job since 2020, May of 2020.
I think it's my 3-year anniversary in like 3 days.
Oh.
So I started this, but I think in COVID years,
yes, exactly.
That's probably 7 years. That must be at least 7 years. But I started on May the 1st, 3 years ago. So fortunately, I had a year, I guess, almost a year before COVID struck, which I think was very fortunate because I had a chance to get to know people in 3 dimensions before we all ended up in 2 dimensions for a while. So that, I think, was invaluable. I was very grateful. We had that head start on COVID.
So when you were first starting to interview for the job or talk to Lincoln Center, what was it that they said that they were looking for in a new president and CEO?
I think I thought they were very thoughtful, actually. They were thinking a lot about the kind of breadth of things that they wanted to achieve. And, like anyone who's hiring any job, everyone always wants the unicorn, right? You want someone who can do all the things perfectly. And I think they just thought carefully about, they wanted someone who I think could show some real leadership. I think this is a board of directors who are very serious people, and they want to achieve real things. So they really definitely wanted to see some leadership. I remember they were always asking about, what's the vision? Where are you trying to take us to? So that was clear. They were very committed to the idea of, how do our wonderful organizations work together a bit more, right? Lincoln Center, for all of its many achievements, perhaps one of the really unrealized opportunities at Lincoln Center is to take these 10 extraordinary organizations on 16 acres and bring them together more. So I think they were very focused on that idea. I think they were very focused on David Geffen Hall and where that project was going to go and how that was going to land. And I think they were looking for someone who could respect the traditions of Lincoln Center and simultaneously take them into the future. I had a minus 100 days plan, which I remember this. So, people usually have a 100 days plan. I had a minus 100 days plan. There were 100 days from having given my notice at the Y to starting at Lincoln Center. And I used those 100 days to meet all of our staff and almost all of the board and all of our constituent leaders. So I did lots of meetings in the run-up. And so by day one proper, I think I had really done a lot of listening to what people really wanted to see. And that crystallized quite quickly. I mean, the first morning of my first day at Lincoln Center, I said we were going to do 3 things. Number 1 was David Geffen Hall. So we were going to get that project on track and get it built. Number 2 was we were going to fix our finances. We're going to really dig into our finances and make sure we were running an institution in the way that we ought to be. And number 3, we were going to think a lot about culture. How do we think about our constituents? How do we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion? How do we reimagine the organization? So certainly day one, those 3 clear agendas, get Geffen Hall right, get the finances right, and then get the culture right around both the constituents and how we interact there, and the broader question of diversity and inclusion. And that's really been the story of the last 3 years. I remember at the start of the pandemic, I had this real sense that at the end of all this, there were going to be 2 types of organizations. There will be those organizations who paused, right, and who, their 2023 will look a lot like their 2018, right? They'll come through this period and they'll basically hope they can start up where they were before. And there'll be organizations who transformed. And I was very committed to the idea, and so was the board, that we were going to use this period to transform the institution. And I think that's what we've been trying to do.
Right. And what was the situation with the finances? Were they shaky when you were first hired?
I think that they weren't not shaky, but I think they needed some work. I think there was a lot of things that, obviously, look, this is not breaking news. We'd had a lot of leadership churn at Lincoln Center. We'd had a number of presidents over a number of years.
Right.
And just a lot of the basics needed some restructuring and some addressing and some focusing, just to kind of get the machine in order, to kind of get the car ready for the journey we wanted to go on. There was a bit of a tune-up needed. And so we needed to do that. And that was very important.
Right. How many folks have you brought on board since you've been there?
My entire executive team is new. So the whole executive team of Lincoln Center is a new team, and I imagine some region of a third of the staff, if not higher, is new too. So there's been a lot of change.
Yeah.
And it was the right time for, Lincoln Center is 60 years old. It was the right time for some different perspectives, some fresh energy. I'm especially proud of the fact that our executive team, the majority of the executive team at Lincoln Center, are people of color now, and we have the best executive team, I think, in the business. I mean, we could not have a stronger executive team, and we have benefited so much from having a broad set of perspectives around the top table in terms of the decision making that we've made. It's made the organization so much stronger. So there's a brand new team at the top, and actually throughout the organization there have been a lot of promotions and a lot of changes. We've been very intentional about how we try and transform the culture of the organization, all as a prelude really for the kind of organization we want to grow to be.
Right. And apart from being incredibly diverse and inclusive, what is that organization that you want to be, and how radical is the shift away from what it was in terms of programming, especially classical music?
I don't think it's radical. I think it's intentional, actually. I mean, I think there's not, radical is one of those words which does well on social media, but doesn't mean much in the real world, right? This is not a night and day transformation. We are proud of all of the classical music we'll be presenting. There's all sorts of interesting things that extend long traditions. Having said that, one of the things I've been very focused on, and this was true at the 92nd Street Y, which was 143 years old, which was my job before this one.
Right.
What are we really trying to do here? And if you go back to the original vision of John Rockefeller, which began Lincoln Center, he believed, he said this, these were his words, he said that the arts should not be peripheral but central to life. They should not be pure entertainment, but they should be fundamental to being a human being. And they should not be for the few, but for the many. That was his founding vision of Lincoln Center. That is our vision today. So you could argue we're not being in any way radical. All we're trying to do is live up to what we were supposed to be doing 60 years ago. And I think the way I would frame this is not classical versus non-classical, because that clearly isn't what we're doing, but very much how do we get to that Rockefeller vision of serving more people more widely? How do we make more people feel they see themselves at Lincoln Center, they see a home at Lincoln Center? How do more New Yorkers feel that this wonderful organization is part of their right as a New Yorker? That's where we're trying to get to, which I think is actually a more complicated question than one of disciplines.
Interesting. So does this mean that the series, when you say talking about Lincoln Center interacting with the constituents, how does that manifest? Does that mean that Lincoln Center will no longer be almost a competitor with some of its constituents, or how does that work?
Look, I think we're definitely prioritizing our constituents. We said that the board signed off on that before COVID, that actually our priority was serving our constituents. And I think we have a unique responsibility, which the Philharmonic doesn't have, and nor does the Met, nor does the Ballet. our job is to make the whole thing work. Our job is the whole ecosystem, right? Making everything work together. The Phil's job, Deborah Border's job, is to be a good citizen and to work well with her constituents, which she does all the time, but it's not her job to make the whole Lincoln Center enterprise make sense. That's our job. And so as a part of that, we have certainly, we have like any organization, precious resources, and we have focused them very intentionally in areas that are not lining up directly against our constituents. There's no question of that. So when you look at what we're doing this summer, is a perfect example of, I think, Lincoln Center adding some unique value to what the organization is doing, that we're doing all of these things which bring in new artists, new art forms, new audiences, at a time when our constituents are typically quieter, right, over the summer, or they're out of season. And I think that's a very good way for us to focus our efforts. I think that is more of a priority now than, for example, having orchestras from other countries come to play during the season when the Philharmonic's playing. I don't think that is a priority for us right now. Not to say we won't ever do it again, right? There are no night and day decisions here at Lincoln Center, but right now in the moment, we are very focused on two things. One, how do we support and complement our constituents and bring them together? And two, how do we find out where next, right? One of the reasons we hired Shanta was we are Lincoln Center for the performing arts, right? All of the performing arts. And historically, we've obviously been very focused on the classical arts and jazz and film, but we have a very clear intention there. There is, I think, a lot of opportunity in some of the new areas that Shanta's moving us into, particularly around things like contemporary music or world music, some of those areas, or poetry, some of these things that actually haven't been at heart and center of Lincoln Center. I think you're going to see us do a lot more of that work. And just to be clear, we are doing more programming than ever. So if there was ever a suspicion that somehow this period was us stepping back from programming, far from it. We're going forward. We're actually doing more programming than we've ever done.
Do you see Lincoln Center becoming more of a community center, the way that the Y is, in terms of lectures and classes and things like that?
No, but I think I do see us as becoming more of a civic center. So I think you'll definitely see us do a lot more to think about our role as a civic actor. So what I mean by that is, during the pandemic, we've had blood drives, we've had food drives, we've run naturalization ceremonies, we've done graduations for high schools. There's been a whole kind of suite of activities which are about our job serving the city, which I think have been beneficial to Lincoln Center and to all of our constituents as things that we ought to be doing to serve the city. So I definitely think that's true. And I think that we will try and do a better job in general of fostering a sense of community. Not the same thing as being a community center, but I do think that one of the great challenges for the performing arts is too often we have a very transactional relationship with our audiences, right? They buy their ticket, they come, they go, they don't really engage with their fellow audience members, they don't really have a connection with the artist other than the playbill or what they hear on stage. There's so much more we can do, I think, to make not just new people feel belonging at Lincoln Center, but make our traditional audiences feel that they belong at Lincoln Center.
What about great performers, White Light Festival?
For the next year, those are not on the docket. And I think we are, the times require us, I think, our job at Lincoln Center or any arts organization is not to create series that last forever. I think we've been thinking a lot now about the next 12 months and what we can do to serve the city. So this summer is a good example, right? We haven't done what we've historically done, which is, have our 7 festivals. We've said we want to have one big festival for New York called Summer for the City. Almost all of it is free, 10 outdoor stages designed to bring people to New York, to use the great power of the arts, to bring people joy, to help them reclaim some of the things that they've lost, to help them remember some of the things we've all sustained as traumas during this difficult time. And I think that's a good example of where our programming mindset is right now, which is we want to be a rapid response organization for a while. I think it's really important that we can speak to the moment, and the arts have so much to say.
So that means probably more theater, more diverse programming, and so on, right? Because
I think it means a broader aperture. The classification of Link Inc. as a kind of distant landlord, I thought has never been particularly accurate. If we were a landlord, we'd be out of business because we're not doing a very good job of it. What we're trying to be is a host for all these organizations and a connector.
Right.
And look, again, we are 3 years into a decade-long journey. And I think if we can do another 3 years of this kind of a progress, then I think our constituents will begin to consider us in a new way, and we'll be able to be a lot more impactful.
That's interesting. And programmatically, do you see some intersections going on, or?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, we announced yesterday. So Peter, I think this is a good example, actually. Peter Gelb at the opera has this wonderful project with the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra,
right.
which he has put together with the Polish opera, who were touring Europe this summer.
Yeah.
And he called me and said, look, could we work together on this? And is there a way of bringing this to Lincoln Center? And so we worked out a way of doing that. And actually, when the orchestra, the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra, which is made up, for those who haven't heard of this, made up of Ukrainian players, both refugees and indeed some people who are inside Ukraine now who will be given special permission to come and perform, when they come to campus, all 10 of our organizations will co-present that concert. But that's that pair of concerts. I don't think that's ever happened before, that we've actually all collectively presented something together.
With so much of the programming this summer, and much of it on the sort of outskirts of the new Geffen Hall, designed to be free, how are you going to pay for it all?
Well, I think, look, there's going to be a combination of different things we're doing with price levers. So certainly this summer, I think it was very important that we did a lot of free programming, because we really want to make people feel, one of the biggest barriers in terms of belonging can often be ticket price, right? So we want to be thoughtful about that.
Right.
So we're very intentional about that. We've been fortunate that we have a board of directors and we have many supporters who I think have been great backers of this vision, who believe in a different kind of a Lincoln Center. And when you share the statistics I just shared you about new audiences to Lincoln Center, people really respond to the idea that this is work we should be doing.
Right.
And then we're starting some interesting experiments around ticketing. So there's been a good experiment which Leah Johnson, who's our communications genius, has been leading recently around pay what you choose ticketing. So this is ticketing which is not free, but actually gives people the opportunity to choose a price which is in line with what they're able to contribute. And that has looked very promising. So I think what you'll see is a lot of experiments from us around ticket price, and you'll see a lot of full price shows. Let me just be clear about that. We're not, this summer, we are very intentionally saying this should be a big free summer. And we think that's important. There'll be lots of shows that we'll program in the future, which will be, full ticket prices and in line with many of the ticket prices you will see historically. So this is not again, I guess if there's one thing I'd want your viewers to understand about what we're trying to do, is none of this is a binary. It's not free versus paid. It's not classical versus non-classical. It's not history versus future. All of this is the job of an institution, which is what is the right blend, right? The right blend of tradition and innovation. I think that's what my job ultimately is, right? Is to try and find the right way to thread that needle. We don't always get it right. Sometimes we go too much tradition, sometimes too much innovation. But we have to resist the idea that any of this is a binary.
And how, when you talk about things like the ticketing adjusting initiative, how will that impact the constituents, or will it?
Let's see. I think it's an experiment we're trying. I know a number of constituents have tried similar schemes in the past. This is not revolutionary from us. I think everyone's going to be thinking a lot about price, and I think everyone's going to be thinking a lot about access. These trends are across campus. And I think one of the interesting things, which again, I think is our responsibility, is how do we learn together as a campus, right? You have these 10 amazing organizations all together. There are all sorts of impressive innovations happening at different organizations, which part of our job, I think, is to make sure those learnings get shared. So the other thing we've been doing a lot of is creating campus-wide groups around marketing, around ticketing, around diversity, around legal, who are all of the counterparts on campus are working together to share best practice and information. Because if something's working at Jazz at Lincoln Center, that might well work at the ballet and it might well work at the theater. So I think part of what we're trying to do is create the kind of infrastructure on campus that allows us all to share best practice in more meaningful ways.
Well, thank you for your insights, and I certainly look forward to see Lincoln Center's continued evolution into a place for everyone, not just rich white people.
No. We will do our very best to live up to the Rockefeller, the John Rockefeller vision, although I'm not sure his vision included the 10-foot disco ball or the 1,000-person dance floor we're building on the plaza this summer. But I hope you and your viewers will all come join us this summer and come and dance, because God knows we all need to dance.
Oh, yes, we do. We do indeed. Yeah. So thanks again and best of luck.
Thank you.